Hey, Alex.
Hello, hello. How's it going, my friend?
Great. How about you?
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, you sound good this time.
Thank you. Well, you see, we're using the headset, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So you have a handout here.
Yeah, I put in, it's just something they can download. It's a template from the government for a harassment policy. I just
Okay.
find it useful. So if any of the attendees needs to write one, they don't start from zero.
Smart.
I'm a lazy person, so that's how lazy people do stuff. They just find someone who did it before and then just tweak it, run it
Yeah.
by a lawyer or two, and then you're golden.
Yeah, that's smart. The smartest people are the laziest.
Well, maybe not the smartest, but you get more stuff done that way.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Let's see here.
so there's another so Sherry who's here, but
Yeah.
she's muted.
You here, Sherry? I think so.
I don't know. Anyways, but she couldn't find the presentation, so I sent it to her what I sent you yesterday.
Cool.
So I don't know if it's here, but
Let me just open it. Oh, so we're live. Oh, I'm surprised. We're live on Facebook. Facebook Live.
beautiful. We're just collecting
Anyway,
more and more people.
You're saying, Sherry? Do we have a link to the? Because I don't see it in the slides.
Yeah, I've already uploaded his PDF.
But I only see one file in the presentation.
Can you refresh?
I don't think I can. Can you load it? Can you load it up?
Or
Well, I can load it up if you want to.
Or is it in the slide section? Because I clicked the slide in there.
I think you have to
yeah,
hit on the plus and then do present slides and then maybe upload.
Okay,
can you check again on the loads and files and videos? It's
Yeah.
already there.
Yeah. No, I'll do that. Let me do this here. Okay, so now it should be good in a few seconds. If anything, I can just share my screen and run it here, so it's not a big deal.
Can you confirm, Sherry? Did you email it to me, Alex? There we go. There we go. We have it. It's all good.
Oh, here it is. Okay, good.
So I thank everyone who's watching us from Facebook. No, not Facebook. We're live on Facebook, on YouTube. And now we are live on Facebook. Wow. Everyone on Facebook, welcome. Wow. Welcome. We have a very exciting new, it's always new, webinar for you guys today. A very important topic. We have Alex Zlatin, CEO of Maximum Software Systems, creator of Maxident here with us. And it's also executive director of Dental Office Managers Association of Canada. So,
do you want to make it live here, or are we gonna wait like the 4 minutes until?
So right now, I guess. Right now, this is the behind the scenes, I guess. So people can watch us already on on, I think, on Facebook and on YouTube.
Yeah.
But once this is finished, we clip out this beginning part.
Oh, so this is so all the people who watch us live get to see the before, how we get it all organized and everything.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the Dental Office Managers Association of Canada?
Definitely, definitely. So we all know that all of the clinicians have their own associations and their own colleges, their own continuous education, and their credentials. But there's really nothing for the administrative side of it in dentistry. The reality is you need credentials, you need knowledge, you need experience, you need a very good business understanding if you are to operate properly in the administrative side in a dental clinic. There's a lot of things you need to know. So what I've done is I've launched a federally incorporated non-for-profit to serve as that entity to bring all of the admin staff, whether receptionist, office manager, even consultants, to come together under this umbrella of education and certification, create some standards with regards to how we operate in a dental clinic and what you need to do on the administrative, on the business side to make it all run fluidly and seamlessly. And there's a lot. One of the exciting new things is that we recently accredited the first program for dental office administration with Robertson College. They have their campuses in Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and their online program for dental office administrator is also accredited, which means that the students who graduate will automatically qualify to take on the exam, and then they would have a national certification to attest to their capabilities and knowledge to work in the dental clinic. So that's kind of the most recent news that we've done. Accreditation process is a pretty lengthy one where we assess all of the colleges, all the program's details with regards to their curriculum, the instructors, a lot of school policies with regards to access to information and other parameters. And once a program is able to satisfy all of the standards, they get accredited. And I think it's a good start to get some standards across the board, coast to coast in Canada, and we're going to enhance the accreditation to other programs in the same realm as we go. And there's going to be some exciting new stuff coming.
Awesome. So we have a minute before we officially go live. So it's very exciting. Let's see here. So we have the 5 toughest HR questions here. Let's see, intro slide. Okay. So the countdown for everyone. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We got another great one here. We already have a bunch of people watching on Facebook Live that I see. So hello to everyone from Facebook Live. And we have a few attendees lined up in the waiting room. So they will be joining in a moment. This is the countdown. 10, 9, 8.
Hello all, my name is Zlatin, and I'd like to invite you to our webinar with Sharky on the topic of human resource on September 9th. I'm here sponsoring the Winnipeg Dental Society golf tournament. It's a great day here to support the community and this organization. But I want to talk to you about the webinar that I'd like you to register for. Sharky and I are going to talk a lot about some human resource related questions that both employees and employers tend to avoid and not ask. So we're going to talk about those, and we're going to talk a little bit about how the pandemic has kind of threw in a twist into how we handle human resource and how we consume our information about human resource and the legal implications of it. So I'd like to invite you to join Sharky and I September 9th, and I'll see you there. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Dentistry business. Now, the employee and employer relationship are often one of the most crucial aspects of your practice. However, they are often overlooked or ignored, and it creates unnecessary friction in your office. Having a clear communication among team members, adhering to policies and transparency reduces the risk of employer and creates clarity in the workplace. It has the same importance during the COVID-19 as it has during non-pandemic times. I think there's a lot of talk that has been in offices about will the patient come back or not come back, about the procedures, but how are you communicating with your staff? Are you saying the right things? Are you discussing what on their minds? So today, Alex Zlatin will be covering that, the 5 toughest HR questions. If you have more questions, feel free to post that in the comment chat section. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. Where else? Probably some other places as well. So we're monitoring it. So you can just post in the comment section, and we will bring up during the discussion or at the end. And I want to give you a quick introduction about the Dentistry Business Webinar Series. Our goal is to become the educational platform for the dental industry. We want to connect you to the top speakers in the dental industry to share with you relevant information to help you grow your practice and to help you succeed. There are a lot of challenges facing dental offices currently, even before the pandemic, but it has multiplied. And we look to answer all those tough questions, bring you the latest news, latest kind of best practices as well. So help you to manage your practice. And just a quick, we started in April near the start of the pandemic, and we've had over, I think, 30 or 40 webinars by now, and we're all booked for the next couple of months. So stay tuned. So a little background about me. I'm Sharky, CEO of Dentist Find. We're a result-driven dental marketing platform and marketing services. Basically, using our technology we have created over 10 years and our research, any dental practice using our marketing solution is able to increase the new patient booking by at least 40% or more. Some of them even have triple the booking using our technology and our services. And I teach the Dental Marketing Social Media Fundamentals course at the University of Toronto. My company, Dentist Find, started in 2010, and we have 25 full-time employees doing research and developing our technology, as well as we organize the dental marketing conference as well. And your feature speaker today, feature guest, is Alex Zlatin. As CEO, Alex Zlatin helps struggling dental professionals take control of their practices and reach the next level of success with responsible leadership strategies. Leveraging over 13 years of management and consulting experience, he empowers organizations to become more productive and profitable based on the belief that successful businesses establish a genuine connection with employees, patients, and vendors. Alex also volunteers his time and expertise with various professional organizations, have launched the Dental Office Manager Association of Canada, and is the author of Responsible Dental Ownership, Balancing Ethics and Business Through Purpose, available on Amazon. And we'll post a link to the book so you can grab the book as well. I know we are talking about the 5 toughest HR questions today, but I have a really pressing question for myself, for you, Alex. How did you do with the Winnipeg golf tournament? Did you?
You know what? It's a really interesting thing because up until probably a week and a half before the tournament, they didn't even know if it's gonna move ahead just because of COVID and everything else. But they had a great combination of awesome attendance. I'm assuming people just wanted to get out and do the interaction. It was a good idea, just because it had really good weather. It was really warm, but it was beautiful for golf. And I think just the event was really happy. Everyone were interacting, really happy to get out. So it was a great success. I haven't won anything, but apparently they all had some sort of a prize for, regardless of how you make it at golf, probably just for attendance or just for being brave enough to come out and interact a little bit with everyone. So, beautiful event, really good, well done.
Great, great. And for everyone that's attending, I know we have we have some guests in the webinar. For people that's watching us on the social media like Facebook, LinkedIn, if you want a CE credit for this or be able to watch this on demand, go to dentistrybusiness.com and you can register. And we also post a link, Facebook link there. So if you share that on your Facebook profile, they will be able to stream this webinar live. So please do that to help spread the word. Yeah, so you can take it from here, Alex.
Sounds good. That's awesome. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. You're whether on social media or through this platform here. I think you're probably amongst the bravest individuals who are not afraid to tackle some very difficult questions and some very difficult processes with regards to managing the clinic. In the past, it used to be really easy to manage a clinic, but today with sterilization protocols, especially during pandemic time, it is becoming more and more challenging just because you have so many things to be responsible for. And I think it's, you can't know everything. So working with knowledgeable vendors, consultants is very, very important. I think you can never have too much information. HR is a topic I am really passionate about. And one of the reasons why is because humans are extremely unpredictable. And the ability to build a cohesive team long term is an ongoing effort that you have to put in. Now, outside of that, there's a lot of regulations that come with that. And I think that knowing the regulations allow you to build your own process, your own culture within the constraints that you have to operate with regards to the various legislations and acts and everything. So, we have a pretty packed presentation. As a disclaimer, As you can see, my credentials, on the presentation. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a CPHR certified person. I am just a person who is running a business and, providing some advice to other business owners in the realm of human resource, but not only. And again, everything you see on the slide, every question we answer, you should ask a professional lawyer. Not that I have anything against lawyers, but I'll give you an advice on my practices. I always ask 2 separate lawyers, just because as any professional, their knowledge is limited to their experience. So, sometimes if it's a really complex, very high risk topic, you should actually get advice from 3 lawyers. It gets expensive pretty fast, but it's better than making a mistake. So, when we talk about, what are the toughest things that you have to deal with in a clinic or in any business per se, is we want to talk about some human rights aspects. Human rights legislation has been used more and more, and I'll show some statistics with regards to the usage of how many complaints in Canada through the commissioner. It is a big legislation, and the more you know about it, the more or the better you can build your processes and policies within the clinic. I think it's important to ask the questions and understand what is expected from you as an employer, what is expected from you as an employee, and what is the relationship there with regards to human rights. Termination is a big deal, whether it's a layoff leading to termination, COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID. Termination will always be there on many grounds, and I think understanding what is the proper process for termination and using the right terminology and documentation is crucial to protect yourself, whether you are an employee or an employer. Harassment has been a big deal going on. Harassment has been on the rise with regards to complaints. It's a part of discrimination aspects through the human rights legislation. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I've also prepared a handout if any one of the participants do not have access to a harassment policy. Now, this is not a policy about harassment, it's about a policy of how harassment is prohibited. If you don't have such a policy, then you can have a template created by Manitoba Human Rights. And again, it's a template, so obviously read through it, run it by a lawyer or 2, and only when it is perfect for your clinic, use it. And we're going to talk a little bit about harassment, how to prevent it, how to address it properly. We're going to talk a little bit about pay. Are we paying enough? Are we being paid enough? How do you even do you just believe that you are being underpaid, or is everyone being underpaid? Is it the profession? Is it the employer? We're going to talk about that. And then when's the right time to move on? I think that's a very, very tough question, whether it's, an employee or an employer. We're going to touch upon that as well. If you've ever seen one of my webinars before, I do enjoy the interaction with the audience, so feel free to use the chat to post any questions. I'm going to ask you some questions, so your participation in answering would be extremely welcome. So let's kind of dive in and let's talk about duty to accommodate, undue hardship, and how is it relevant to our day and age. And I think that as we ask ourselves that, we want to understand a little bit as to what is going on here. Duty to accommodate. So duty to accommodate basically means that we, as an employer, must accommodate certain aspects of our employees in order to prevent discrimination. So, most of these duty to accommodate requests are dealing specifically with certain disabilities, which is one of the grounds of discrimination. So, for instance, if, specifically for hygienists or even some of your associates or the front admin staff, a lot of them develop carpal tunnel. And as such, they require either certain tools or access to something. So for instance, the easiest example here would be a receptionist comes to you and says, hey, I've been having this wrist pain, and I would like you to buy me a ergonomic keyboard and mouse, and you price it out, it's about $100 and some. Is it your duty to accommodate? Well, the answer is yes. So, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to interpret all of the law and all of the legislation. But what I am going to tell you is that the legislation for human rights expect you as an employer to endure hardship in order to accommodate employees with regards to all of those topics of discrimination, and disability is one of them. So if you're asking me, should you buy a stand-up desk for your receptionist? The answer is yes. Should you buy an ergonomic keyboard and mouse? Yes. Now, I've put in some examples with regards to duty to accommodate. Same thing goes for people who have certain vision disabilities, special screens, special displays. So all of these types of things are things that you as an employer are expected by the Human Rights Act to accommodate, to make sure that there's no discrimination based on an individual's impairment or disability. So if it comes as news to people amongst you who are employers, then I recommend you have an urgent conversation with your lawyer to understand, what are the liabilities that have already occurred in your business. If you've already had that conversation and you're well aware of this, this is very, very good. So then, we kind of touched upon duty to accommodate. I'm not going to dwell very long on this. Conversation with a lawyer to explain exactly what it is and how it relates specifically to your business and specifically to requests coming from your staff is a better investment of your time. I do want to talk about undue hardship. And undue hardship, so, I mentioned that the Act expects you to experience some sort of hardship as an employer. But undue hardship means it is too much of an investment, too much of an accommodation that is going to bring direct impact to your business, your clients. And as such, you might think, okay, so how do we determine? And the answer is, well, it's shades of gray. And as you can see here. Now, the problem becomes that it's not as granular as you can see here. In essence, this is more like these shades of gray. And when I say this, we talk about accommodating certain employees with regards to their family situation. Specifically now, we have the COVID-19 situation, very relevant back to school cohorts, and the high potential of needing to pick up your kids in case they are either not feeling well or someone is not feeling well and they're part of their cohort, and until they know that they're negative for the virus. So do you need to accommodate? How do all of these things work? Unfortunately, the answer to it is it depends, which is why it's a gray area. This is one of the problems when it comes to determining what it is that you need to do in any given situation. So if we're talking about a medical condition, in order for you to understand how to accommodate this, the employee has to bring it to your attention. And then they also should bring some sort of a note from a doctor that will elaborate as to the condition, so you are able to investigate more on this topic to see what type of accommodation is required for that particular situation. I also encourage you in that case to speak to a lawyer or two, like always, but also speak to your provincial human rights government body. They are there for a reason to answer these questions, to make sure that what you're doing makes sense with regards to how the act is written and what is required from you as an employer. As always, as I recommend to do with CRA and employment standards, similar thing here, my recommendation is call twice. So you speak with 2 different agents. Yeah, it takes more time, but then again, if you get the same answer both times, there's a higher probability that the answer you got is actually the right answer. So with regards to complaints to human rights, you might think, yeah, but who's going to go through the extent of submitting a complaint, everything? Should we be worried? And the answer is yes. So I took away some graphs from the annual report of the Human Rights Commissioner, the Canadian one. Keep in mind that this is just the federal one, not necessarily dealing with the provincial one that might get some more complaints. So we want to look a little bit into the details. We had 36,000 people contact, out of which 1,200 actually filled out complaints. Out of every 30 people who reached out, opened up a complaint. Now, if you look at the bottom right, this is the highest amount of complaints in a decade, which tells you this is on the rise, which means, as an employer, you have an increasing risk here if you and your office are not conducting yourself according to what the Act deems necessary. Looking on a spread of where the complaints originated from, Ontario is leading by 42%, which should come as no surprise to that. There's a lot of businesses there, a lot of things happening. What are the complaints about? If it's a little small, I can tell you what are the important parts. 58% of complaints are employment related. Add to this 8% harassment employment, which is a part of employment, you get 66%. So 2/3 out of all of the complaints are employment related. This is huge piece of information. And it tells you that there is a lot of things that are wrong in how businesses conduct employment. Looking at where the complaints about, almost 50% is the private sector. So again, there's a lot of things here to consider, but these are the stats that been for 2019. Potentially 2020, because of the pandemic, might be low, might be higher, depending on how businesses conduct themselves. And I'm pretty sure that how, between the regulations changing in Ontario, between the battle of the dental college and the hygiene college, it's been challenging to navigate the regular employment standards and the CRA related regulations and programs. Add to it human rights that hasn't really changed during the pandemic, but everything in the Act still stands, and we'll get each very challenging situation. the sensitivity to employees or every human being and their impairments and disabilities, and how it is up to the employer, whether federal or private sector, to make sure that they are able to perform the job and not be discriminated against, is a big deal. It's on the rise, and you must make sure that your office is prepared. So you have to understand what all these things mean, and you have to be able to accommodate these things. So I hope this was kind of an introduction. If you've already known about the duty to accommodate, undue hardship, this is good. If you haven't, I highly encourage you to have this conversation with your lawyer pretty much right away. So let's jump into the second topic. We want to talk about termination. As an employee, as an employer, termination is probably the most obnoxious thing we have to do as part of our job. But as such, I want to ask everyone here a question. When, as an employee, when you were terminated, think of a time. If you're an employer, when it's time to terminate an employee, how many notices should you have before you do that? So type into the chat if you have an answer or you're thinking. You're going to answer it in a minute or two. While you answer, I'm going to quickly have a drink of hot cocoa. So I don't know if you're seeing, but there's a chat option in the chat. If you're able to type in the answer, that would be most appreciated. Sharky, any replies from the social media streams? I know you have access to that.
Let's take a look. I think people are a bit shy today.
That's okay. Here we have Sandra. It depends what the policy says. We have 3 strikes policy. That's very good. Thank you, Sandra. So does that mean that on the 3rd strike, the employee is out? I'm assuming yes. If I have your baseball reference, Copper. Okay, I think we can move forward. You let me know, Sharky, if you have anything on the social media.
Sure.
Yeah, Sandra's saying yes, but they still have a contract that would determine what notice or paying of notice they get. Yeah, you're right. So the contract does not necessarily protect you, because if it says, oh, you get 1 notice and then you're out, it might not be enforceable in court. So if you have that, getting it looked at by a lawyer periodically is not a bad idea. Pay in lieu has nothing to do with the notices with regards to the termination. But if you want to protect yourself very well, then what you should be doing is you should have 4 documentation with regards to the actual infraction. Now, I'm going to tell you something that as an employer, you might not really like to hear. But in order for you to accumulate notices in order to terminate an employee, that's not the right terminology that you have to use. The memos or notices are there to help the employee improve their performance in order to eliminate the infraction. Now, at the end of the day, you run a business and you need the employee to perform in a certain way. And if they refuse to, then obviously you terminate their employment. But the process of the process is not to collect these documentations and let the employee leave, because then if that is how you use the terminology, then that is what is going to come across in court, that you were just collecting paperwork to let them go. The reality is, just because a person committed an infraction doesn't mean that they meant to do it, doesn't mean that they want to, negatively impact your business. So, this is what I recommend. This has been recommended by a lot of consultants as well that actually represent dentists with umpires with regards to particular claims. And this, the number 4 has been proven to be kind of the magic number. So, if we want to look at these, we want to look at, first one is a verbal memo. So what is it? How can a memo be verbal, and how can you document that? So let's say that, we're not gonna write someone up the first time they make an infraction. So what's happening is you're gonna see, let's say we talk about someone who's using their phone against the office policy. So you see them once, you're gonna say, hey, Sally, why don't you kind of, not use the phone, because that's the policy we have. That's okay. The next day, same thing happens. Maybe not the same day, maybe 2, 3 days after, you do what's called a verbal memo. And what it is a memo that you put in the employee's file with regards to an observation you had and a conversation you had with them. It's not a formal conversation, it's a conversation that occurred in the hallway or in the lunchroom or wherever it did. And it's just a documentation of the fact that such an interaction has occurred. Now, depending on the infraction and how it affects it, the best optimal perfect world scenario is you would wait 1 pay period between each memo from that point onwards. Now, obviously, if the infraction is negatively impacting your business, then you would expedite this particular process, especially when there's a reoccurring infraction. But the reason that you allow for a pay period is because depending on the infraction, there might be a monetary obstacle from an employee to fix their ways. So, quick example is, I arrived late at work, and obviously arriving late is very bad. So there's a problem. So you meet with the employee and say, okay, so how are you going to fix the fact that you're late? So in order for you to not be late. So they'll say, okay, well, my phone's not working, whatever, I'll buy an alarm clock. So if the following day they come in late, it's going to be challenging for you to say, okay, well, you arrived late, I'm going to write you up. Because then they can claim that they didn't have the funds to buy an alarm clock. Now, this is an exaggeration because an alarm clock is $2 at the dollar store. But the reality is that that is what they can say. So in a perfect world, 1 pay period between these documentations. At extreme cases where there's a high impact on your business, which you have to demonstrate if the case goes to an umpire or court. You write a written memo of a formal meeting that has occurred with regards to the fact that it was explained and the employee signs. Now, in this case, a lot of employers, office managers, dentists tell me, well, what if the employee doesn't want to sign? Well, it all depends on what you put in on the fact that they're signing. So the blurb there must say something to the extent of, this information was presented to me. My signature does not represent that I agree to the claims made, just to the fact that this conversation occurred. And then if they don't sign it, it's actually better for you as an employer in court, because it doesn't really admit any fault. It just admits that the conversation happened, which is what the purpose of all of these documents are. And then we have, step 3 and 4. And the reason why they're called this way is because in order to get a May memo, you pretty much copy the previous one and you add a sentence that says future infractions of this nature may lead to further disciplinary actions and or termination. Because then there's some consequences, but it says may, and then the last one is the same letter, just change the word may to will. And if at that point the employee decides that, I'm just going to keep doing it, then at that point it's just the termination letter. And after that, obviously, the pay in lieu of notice, because obviously if they're impacting negatively your business, you won't want them to stay. But all of that according to the employment standards of your province. And yeah, that's pretty much it on that regard. I know Colleen is saying here with regards to how many notices depends on the reason. Endangerment of patient or fellow employee might mean immediate dismissal. Lesser offenses should involve warning discussions. You're exactly right. So it is best to outline this in the employee handbook that you have with regards to which situations and occurrences will not be tolerated and can lead to immediate termination. The more specific you are, the better it gets, because the less gray area you have. But you're right. What we're talking about here is with regards to how many of these warnings should you give before you're like, okay, enough is enough. And if we're looking at a situation from an employee standpoint, the idea is that, you want to work in this particular office for this employer. And, things happen. But the idea is that if whatever happens is serving as a negative impact on the employer, they have the tools to protect their business against such negative impact. And if you really want to continue to working for this employer, you will make an effort to fix any type of infraction or fill any of the gaps between what is expected from you as an employee and your performance. And I think that is what umpires or courts are looking for, is to see what steps you as an employee took to fill in the gap or fix whatever infraction, and what steps did you take as an employer to assist the employee in becoming better and being able to be fit for the job. So if whomever has more of these things documented will probably have more power in the conversation. But outside of that, I think, just for your peace of mind, keep a documentation of everything, whether you are an employee or an employer, because it will come handy, in case things escalate. And you might think that, things don't really escalate, but they do. And I can tell you that from experience speaking with office managers and dentists, and even some employees who didn't really think it will ever escalate to this because, the dentist is so nice, or the receptionist is so nice. And then things escalated. So these things happen, and, you have to document everything, because that's your way of showcasing, what is your side, and not just tell a story, which is not always admissible when you're speaking with an umpire or court. So I think harassment is a huge, huge topic, and it's going to become a big deal. I think it's already a big deal. We want to look at, the Black Lives Matter movement, Me Too before that, and there are going to be more and more of these things. We want to look at things like equal pay. This is something that Human Rights Canada has kind of written on its flag, and there has been a plan put in place in a committee to create equal pay. I believe by 2024 or 2025. So, harassment is a type of discrimination. It doesn't really have to be sexual harassment, although it is a part of it. And I think both as employees and employers, it's important to understand what it is and what it isn't. If we want to look at some definitions, I used the Manitoba one specifically, but it's not that different. Want to look at what is harassment in general, and it's just abusive and unwelcome conduct. It can be a comment, it can be whatever it is, if it's abusive or unwelcome. And I think, we live in a hypersensitive world today that if you define harassment as an unwelcome conduct, well, how can I know what someone else considers unwelcome? And, we have some common sense that we have to implement in these cases. This is a very, very touchy subject. Specifically, as you can see, the world, going crazy. Everyone takes offense on social media. But as an employer, I think it's very important to create a harassment-free workplace. And I think it's very crucial that you address everything that has to do with harassment in a very, very serious manner. In a detailed manner. Now the reality is, harassment is prohibited. Well, it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, because otherwise there wouldn't be, riots and other forms of protest in the world. It exists, and part of the idea of the Human Rights Act and other legislation is to try and remove it, eliminate it completely. So I think it's very, very important that as employers in a small business, we're able to address it to the best of our abilities. When we're looking at who can be harassing someone, it's basically everyone. If we're looking at context of a dental clinic, it can be a staff member harassing another staff member. It can be a staff member harassing a patient. It can be a patient harassing a staff member. It can be a person off the street who's not a patient come in, harass staff members or patients. It can be a police officer being harassed by a member of the public in your clinic. It can be the other way around, a police officer harassing someone, your employee or a patient. Vendors and their representatives can be harassed, or can be the ones harassing, which is why, who can be harassed is pretty much the same people. Harassment is not only between employee member and another employee. It's not just patient and staff member. And it's very, very important to understand that harassment can happen in a variety of occurrences with regards to who is the person instigating the harassment and who's on the receiving end of it. Because it will help you to better prepare your office and your policy with regards to how this is handled in case any of these situations occur. So, the harassment can happen, and then how are we going to deal properly with any complaint that comes? So first of all, you need to have a very comprehensive harassment policy. It shouldn't be buried somewhere in your files. It should be visible to all of your staff members, potentially to the patients as well. You want to make sure that you review it and modify it based on the changing environment. You also want to make sure that it's professionally drafted. So, you want to make sure that eyes of people who are professionals in harassment litigation look at it to make sure you and your office and the way it works are covered with regards to how harassment is prevented, but also how it's being investigated. So I think that is very, very important. If you or your office do not have a harassment policy, one of the handouts that I uploaded, actually the only handout that I uploaded, is a template, the harassment policy that Manitoba Human Rights has. You're able to download it and see if it has any elements that yours does not, and maybe it should. If you want to use it and tweak it with the help of a lawyer, then please feel free to download and use it. It's available for public usage, so you don't have to worry about any copyright. But what it is, but please don't use it as is as a template, because it's still a template. So one way of properly addressing a harassment complaint is to prevent it. And one of the most effective ways of preventing anything, whether it's harassment or ransomware or any bodily injury, is through training. So I think if we, as managers, as owners, provide professional training with regards to harassment and the prevention of it, then it stays top of mind, and it might not eliminate it completely, but it will minimize the occurrences of harassment, because you are more aware as to what can be interpreted as harassment, and you also know exactly how this is going to be investigated and addressed, and the seriousness of this with regards to how management and leadership receive this. And I think that's a really, really important part in prevention, is to know that it is going to be taken seriously, and it is going to be addressed in a very detailed manner with consequences, which are all documented in the policy. I think that's a really, really big step, and you might be able to prevent 80% of potential harassment complaints coming your way. And again, one of the biggest things with regards to when government bodies determine or regulators determine whether you have properly addressed the complaint is the proper investigation part of it. Have you taken it seriously? Have you followed your policy? Was it thorough enough? Is it well documented that you can show what, how, and when investigations have been conducted, what interviews have been made, by who? And I think the most important part that a lot of complaint investigation documents miss is the fact that it states what has been done for the investigation and then what was the conclusion that was made, but it does not describe how the conclusion was done. How did you reach the understanding that this is what happened? What was the thought process behind it? And I think that is a key element in documenting any complaint. So that is really, really important. The more documentation you have, the better, the better it seems to any participant of that situation on whatever side, and the more you are doing your job as an employer. So Yeah, and Sandra here is saying that they had a situation where a patient was harassing an employee, and we had to go through the same process, and you're right. And it has to have zero tolerance to harassment of any kind. I've seen many signs for that, specifically in public hospitals. But the same happens here. These things happen more frequently than you might want to admit, and the ability to address it. So, in Sandra's case, we had a patient harassing an employee. If you want to make sure that this employee feels safe and the rest of the employees feel safe, then you must address this, in a very serious manner, and investigate it and understand, get to the bottom of it, and take action, and document it. Obviously, that is extremely important. So. Thanks, Sandra, for sharing that. These things, if you've never investigated a harassment complaint, it might seem completely far away from what you'd be doing, but it happens. So you might find yourself doing this. You better prepare, and the way to prepare is training. Make sure your policy is up to date. And when it comes time to do the investigation, you must be really serious about doing it and properly document the thought process and what was done. So that is that. I think when we talk about pay, there's a term that's called perceived equity, and this is a subconscious process that we go through with ourselves throughout the day, probably many times. And its formula is, my efforts divided by my pay, and how it relates to someone else's efforts divided by their pay. So obviously, you need to know how much they're making. But in all honesty, in a small clinic, more times than not, everyone knows how much everyone else is making. So it's fairly easy to derive these this equation, or this formula. And a lot of times, specifically, you go through this subconscious process where you've done something, out of the ordinary, something outside of your regular work. And it creates a feeling where you are not being paid enough. So there are a few aspects. Before I show some information on the slides, I wanna make some general statements that are relevant here. In work as an employee, you get more value out of being an employee with an employer than just the wages you are being paid. It's going to directly connect to the last topic with regards to when it's time to move on. I've listed kind of 5 feelings or beacons that would illustrate to you if it's time to move on as an employee, and I think that they're important to keep in mind. But when it comes to pay, I think the way you need to look at it is, and as an employer actually as well, what I'm getting back from this, interaction. There's a barter here that's going on. I'm giving you, employer, my time. In return, I'm getting, this basket of things. And one of them is pay. The others can be benefits, bonuses. One of the things that no one really thinks about is you are getting social time. You are interacting with people. You're sharing how was your weekend. You're sharing how was your kid's birthday party. You have interaction. You complain about this rude patient that always comes and whatever. You have this interaction. We humans are very social creatures, and as such, we need this interaction. This pandemic has kind of shifted a lot of the interaction into digital ones, similar to how we are meeting today through this platform. But we are still social creatures, and we need this interaction. And I think that if you're enjoying such an interaction, then this is not something you can just discount and look straight at pay. Now, having said that, if you require a certain level of income to pay your bills and you are getting less, then there's a problem, because then you're going to go into debt, and then it doesn't work for anyone. But there needs to be some sort of a responsibility on the employee side to not just take upon additional expenses and expect their salaries to just rise just because they have bills to pay. On the other side, you want to make sure that the sum of all benefits that employment within your organization brings is more than the time they spend in their efforts. And I think that part of addressing things like questions about am I being paid enough is the ability to create a very good culture in your clinic. And Sharky mentioned the book I authored with regards to responsible dental ownership, and this is a book to dentists who own clinics. It's a book for office managers, even with regards to how to go about creating this clinic that has a culture, that has a purpose, and address all of the other things within that generate success. And I think that this is exactly, directly affects whether or not employees will have this feeling that they're being underpaid. And also, if you have high staff turnover, it's not necessarily because you're not paying enough. It might be because your culture is bad. You're not providing other benefits that these particular staff members require. In some cases, it might be because you are paying too little. So, there's a market price for staff, which, is one of the things that I want to talk about. And, if there are people from the GTA area, if you want to type in how much, you think an RDH makes, average RDH salary in Toronto, if you're not in the GTA area, which I'm seeing a few people that are not, please feel free to drop in some numbers of your own. We want to see, what are the elements of hygiene salaries? Is there a balance? Is it everywhere the same? Or are there big differences between areas? Feel free to drop in some of the numbers. Don't have to necessarily tell me how much yours is making, but what is the market price for a hygienist? And you can see that pretty easy looking at some ads, whether on Indeed or looking at LinkedIn salaries, which I did. My hot cocoa is not hot anymore. It's cold. It is okay. Anyways, maybe a good time to check in with Sharky there and see any comments made on social media, on YouTube, on Facebook, LinkedIn.
Let's take a look here. So we had a question actually about the verbal memos.
Yep.
Can it be recorded, or do you need a written memo about the verbal?
Very good question. So I think that it can be recorded. It's just that you have to realize that you have to store the recording together with your other digital files, and you have to be very detailed with regards to what is the memo that you're doing. So for instance, the written one would have full name of an employee, whereas if you're recording some audio, you might record it and say You say, I don't know, their name and abbreviation. So, you have to make sure that all of the elements of a memo would be there. So if you are playing it 5 years from now, it has to be able to identify the employee, and have all of the information with regards to where it happens, when, what are the details that were discussed, and everything. But I think everything's doable, and then you have to store it together with the employee file. So if all of your files are paper, then it would be more challenging because you almost need to drop the file on a USB stick and keep it in the folder. Then every now and then you have to look that the USB is still good with the data. If you have a digital employee file, which I highly recommend to everyone, and there are a few tools out there that provide that, including one that we provide through the Maxident suite, then it's easier to keep an audio record of this. But like I said, the details are everything with regards to storing that type of information in an audio format. So I hope that answers the question. That's good. I see Sandra's participating, saying we're not in Toronto, but I'm thinking 50 per hour. And you are almost correct. So Toronto, it's about 42. If we want to look at a median, anywhere from 33 to about 50, depending on the actual area, some credentials and things like that. But this is part of why I wanted to bring this. Supply and demand. Toronto is an area that is highly populated. I know that now it's actually been a more interesting trend, specifically because the clash of the colleges, which I call it. So I've seen a trend where a lot of hygienists have resigned because they didn't want to operate in a way that is not in line with their college guidelines. And that created hygienists that wanted work. That also created more work job opportunities. But it kind of divided the clinics into two, whereby the owner is following the stricter guidelines of the hygienist, or clinics that do not. They might have a harder time finding a hygienist and would be paying a higher hourly wage. The reality is, if we want to look at pre-pandemic, supply and demand, supply was extremely high in Toronto. I'd be probably thinking that real hourly wage was probably around 35. Just because if you didn't want to work for 35, I can find another 15 who would. It's sounds really bad, and it's almost commoditizing a whole profession of a healthcare provider. And that's not my point. I do not want to diminish anyone's importance. But the reality is the rules of supply and demand in the economy, they just work. So the more hygienists available to do the work, the less their efforts and work will be valued. And that's just what it is. And the reality is that if you want to look at Calgary, for instance, you have way less competition. And then you're looking at a median of about $50, $51. So less supply, higher salaries. To be honest, I've seen some job ads for a hygienist in, don't remember if it was Calgary or Edmonton or somewhere in between, but they were paying $80 an hour. And I was blown away. $80 an hour is pretty high, and between getting the hygiene department working and between the revenue and the cost, it's challenging to make it as profitable as before. But the reality is if you don't get a hygienist to do it, then you need the dentist to do it, at which point you might as well pay the hygienist $80. But going back to supply and demand plays a huge role with regards to the profession and how much businesses are going to be willing to pay for it. And it's an interesting trick to look at what is the output of new hygienists, in the GTA area in Ontario, and where are they going? Obviously, they all want to stay within the GTA area, which makes it really crowded, together with a huge amount of clinics. So, Sandra's asking, my understanding is the Alberta fee guide pays higher than, say, Ontario, allowing for higher hourly rates. Well, yes and no. The reality is up until 2020, no, 2017, I think. Alberta was without a fee guide for about 20 years, since 97. And as such, it was the Wild Wild West. And I think the highest dental fees in the country were in Fort McMurray. Like really, really high, like unbelievably high. And yeah, then the fee guide was introduced. A lot of offices have switched to listing the fees on their website, which is more on an American way of building a dental website. If you want to talk about sharing your price list on the website, I'm pretty sure Sharky can comment on that better. Creating dozens and hundreds of websites. But even if the Alberta fee guide is higher, it wouldn't be as high as to pay double for hygiene. I feel though that if you're able to get patients in and you do the hygiene properly, you're able to conduct more treatments, and as such, your revenue will, will be on par. But keep in mind it changes some of the ratios between what percentage of revenue needs to come from hygiene department versus how much needs to come from the dental treatments, which is usually a third and 2/3. But at the end of the day, if you're getting the same amount of revenue and you maintain the same level of profitability, then it doesn't really matter. So I think knowing your numbers is really important, and I think understanding of what the cost of salary is, a percentage of that out of all of your expenses, plays a key role in understanding of whether you should be lower or higher, and that helps you create a proper structure between base salary, bonuses, year-end bonus, and all of that type of stuff, because numbers never lie. So the ability to look at your numbers, understanding the market is key. But with regards to looking at are you being paid enough, you can always look online, and you can always see which is probably what everyone does. Even if as an employer you want to see, okay, am I paying my staff properly? I'm going to look at and see how much other clinics are offering, and employees do the same thing, whether they're employed or not. They always try to look and see, are they being paid fairly, and whether there's a better opportunity elsewhere. And the saying, the grass is always greener on the other side, has been proven false many times, because it's not all about the wage. It's about the culture. It's about the people you work with. And as we look at the questions or the beacons of indicators of whether you should move on as an employee, is I list 5 of them. This has been spoken in countless articles with regards to what's happening to you at the end of the weekend. Are you eager to go to work for another week? Or are you dreading the Sunday night dread? Are you just all of a sudden all cold sweat and you're just you get anxious with regards to the start of a new week of going into the office on Monday? That is a dead giveaway that you need to start addressing it. You need to speak with your manager and you need to share that. And you need to identify what exactly is bothering you and seeing if that is something that can be removed. If it's not, this is not a state that you want as an employee to keep yourself in long term. As an employer, you do not want to have an employee with that type of a feeling for long term as well. So it's mutual interest to resolve it and see if there is a resolution. And if not, it is time to look for a new job because it's just not going to work. And the last thing you want is to have any type of interpersonal situation um, impact your patients. So I think that's something you want to make sure that that you address, and if you can't address, then you have to find another solution. If you as an employee feel that you cannot be yourself at the office, this is a big thing. A lot of people try to put on a mask and be a different person than they are in real life. Usually, it's a result of some culture issues within a clinic. Um, you know, um, in extreme cases, actually, in one extreme case that I can think of right now, that particular situation led into a discrimination claim. You want to make sure that people are able to be themselves. Obviously, new employees are going to take some adjustment time to kind of really understand your culture, understand, what it means to be open with staff members and how to resolve conflicts and how to operate on a day-to-day basis. But I think overall, if you feel that you have to be someone else, you have to understand whether you need to stay or not, and the answer is you should not stay. You want to be able to address it, but if you need to be someone else, then you should pretty much leave. It's the ability to put on a mask and be someone you are not is a result of long, very, very long adaptation period, which means you've been feeling really, really bad and out of touch for a long time. And this was your adaptation process to still work and earn a pay, but you're completely disengaged from the office and it might be too late. But if you have this feeling, you have to bring it up and have a conversation about it because it's not good for your mental health. And, there's a limit to how much you can take it. And I recommend that you take active steps into finding a new place of employment where you can be yourself. You don't need to spend any type of time or effort into masking and being who you are not. Stop learning new things. I think this is one of those things that you get from working with an employer where you constantly learn new things. And if you're working in an environment where you've stopped learning new things, again, it's a big red flag. You have to speak with your manager, say, I'm no longer learning things. I need to be able to learn new things and see if the employer wants to be a part of this journey. I know that as an employer, it's very important to ask staff members what are the new things that they've learned, even in their day-to-day. I think it's a very good way to gauge their professional development. Part of the benefits of working for our company is we provide all employees $500 a year to do continuous education of any type that they would like, whether it is connected to their job or not. So if a person wants to take a cooking class, we support that. And the reason is because whatever a person is learning, there's definitely transferable skills that can come in handy with their job. So if we're looking at cooking, first thing that cooking actually teaches you is discipline. Then it teaches you creativity. And those are really good skills to have with any staff member in any position. So we support that, and learning new things is another benefit that you get outside of your regular pay in wages. So that's really important. This is also kind of a tricky indicator. Usually when you're extremely busy, in most cases when you really enjoy what you do, time passes really, really fast. I know for me, it's not just hours or days. I have complete weeks disappear on me, and I end up again on a weekend. Um, that is an indication that you are enjoying what you do. You lose track of time or so. So if, on the flip side, if time moves really, really slow, you're not enjoying what you do, you're not learning new things, you have to take steps as an employee to address this. As an employer, if you ever overhear, or a manager, if you ever overhear any conversation with regards to, oh, I can't believe it's not even 3 o'clock yet, or whatever, things like that, you have to address that. You have to get in a conversation with an employee and say, look, I want your time to pass really fast because I want you engaged. I want you to be learning. I want to know how we as an employer, how we can help support you and get your work to be more enjoyable so time passes fast. And I know it sounds kind of, harsh. Someone just jokingly said something and now you call them in a meeting. But the reality is, if you don't address that, then these little jokes, they're only funny because there's a portion of truth in them. And that portion is going to keep on growing if the employee is not engaged. And it's our job as managers, as leaders, as owners, to make sure that our team is engaged. They are enjoying their time. They'll do better work. Your patients will be happier. So that is another extremely important component which I encourage you to address, whether you are an employee or an employer, manager, leader. And the fifth one is the feeling that your workplace is unstable. If you have associates come and go very frequently, if you have your fellow admin staff, there's a revolving door. Things change without explanation. These are all various occurrences that might happen that might make you feel unstable, that the job, the workplace is unstable. I encourage you to speak with your manager if you're an employee and share that these are your feelings. Perhaps you can get a good explanation as to why this is happening. But as an employer, I will urge you and strongly recommend that you share with your staff what is going on and what are the plans. That is a part of getting them engaged and getting them on board with the plan so they're not caught off guard. But if you as an employee, you feel the place is unstable, no one's sharing any information, I recommend you switch and be able to look for another place that potentially is going to help you overcome this and become happier and feel more stable, because I know that for a lot of families, this is really, really important, is that feeling of I have a stable place, so I then don't have to worry about my workplace anymore, especially when I'm no longer on the clock. So That's my thing, guys. I want to thank everyone here. Colleen, Sandra, thank you very much for participating. The person who asked the question out of the social media, thank you as well. You have my contact information. Please reach out if you have any specific question that you didn't really want to share in this big forum. The websites for both the non-for-profit and our dental software are here, so feel free to check them out. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm been really fun to do this, although I prefer webinars where I have people to interact with. But here I have Pauline and Sandra here helping me out. So thank you very much for that. And until the next webinar we do, stay safe, keep your chin up, and let's chat at some point.
Great. Thanks a lot, Alex, for that. That's very informative. And what you were just saying, how about the turnover? I worked with one office where in a couple of weeks, this has been going on for like 6-7 months, where every few weeks they would tell me about all the turnovers that they have. And then what ended up happening was that there was this 1 week when we were doing the shoot, they told me doing video shoot for the office, they told me every single staff has changed. So it's a pretty big office too, right? So he told me that all the staff has changed, and it's kind of connected with me when I see this high turnover. I think that's the extreme scenario.
Yeah, I know it's what, staff turnover is very, very challenging. But it is what it is. I think that we just have to deal with it.
Yeah. So, we're past the time by quite a bit, but let's take a couple of questions. So you have questions, please post in the comments. So in social media, we have one question here. So when do you contact a lawyer? Like, what some indications, or like at what kind of point where you can't handle it yourself, you need to contact a lawyer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in all honesty, I would recommend, as a general rule, to build an extremely good relationship with your corporate lawyer and your accountant, to the point where you go and have drinks with them. And the reason is it's going to come handy. So, as a general rule, that's very, very important. Now, practically speaking, with certain occurrences that happen, I think that every time you are either requested as an employer to do something, or you want to take a certain action, it is always recommended to get advice, whether your action that you are planning on doing works with the various legislations. So you only know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. So potentially you need to decide to do something, but unfortunately, it might make sense based on your limited understanding of the Human Rights Act or the employment standards, or any particular CRA rules. Those are the areas where you would always want to collect as much information as possible. So I've been seeing a lot of posts on social media groups that are closed for the various dental purposes, where people are asking for legal advice from their colleagues. And that can be a slippery slope, but I think it's a way to obtain information. There's power in numbers. So if you're asking a group of 1,000 office managers or 1,000 dentist owners whether what to do in such a case, there's a high probability that one of them has already went through this. So getting that information is very important. So any source of information is good, only you have to make sure that you take it with a grain of salt, which is why I always recommend asking 2 lawyers, not just one. And I think every time you need to validate your thought process and your decision, it's important to just not do it yourself because you might be incurring certain risk, whether you are or are not aware. So, not every little thing. Now, if the team is asking for a new coffee maker in the staff room, that might not need, a lawyer. But if a employee comes to you and says, look, I've been diagnosed with this disability and this is what I'm going to need to have you make, then you need to get some legal advice as to how to properly address that. And also with regards to, what happens, you have to accommodate them with certain equipment, and then other people wanted the same equipment, but they don't have the disability. Are you are now discriminating them because they do not have a disability? And the answer is, you might be. It depends on the equipment, it depends on the disability, and that's where you need a lawyer or two or three. And you want to talk to your provincial human rights, you want to talk to your provincial employment standards a couple of times and get all of their pieces of advice. And then, as a business owner, decide what is the risk and what is the reward and how you want to deal with it, and move ahead.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So I just want to quickly talk about the upcoming webinars. How to book patients automatically by selecting the right dental marketing agency. So I will do a walkthrough next week of step-by-step questions to ask to find the right marketing agency to help you grow your practice. I see a lot of mistakes made by dentists and in making the decision of choosing which company to go with. And so I'll help you determine create a strategy and process to find the right one, so you can grow your patient flow. And then the following week, on Wednesday, September 23rd, we have Blake Hadley of My Social Practice, and he will be teaching you the process and steps that has worked for other dental offices in leveraging local Instagram influencers so you can grow your practice. So he spoke a little bit about this during the last webinar that he did with us. This is a great step, great process. Most dental offices, probably none in your area, are leveraging this strategy. So he's coming here and he will be teaching you what has worked for some dental offices and how you can leverage it. And then following that, Dental Practice Purchase 101 by Atul. A tool of M&Co Chartered Accountants. So everything you need to know financially when buying a practice. A lot of dentists right now, or even associates, a lot of associates, dentists, or even students are thinking or looking into buying a practice. So a tool would, as an accountant, as dedicated to dental practices and with years and years of experience, he will tell you what to watch out for financially when you buy the practice. As well as a bonus, he will give a fall 2020 dental economic update and tax year-end planning. He'll give you the strategies and give you an economic update and how you can better prepare your practice going forward. And here's information on how to reach Alex here with his email. If you have any additional questions, and make sure to register at dentistrybusiness.com. Once again, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Alex, for those tough 5 questions and telling us how to answer it. And the 6th question about the golf tournament, that's a
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, Sharky.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.